Welcome students to the MOOC titled Introduction to Sociology 2. Today we will discuss the topic of research, the concept and process. Initially, at the very outset, I would like to tell you that there is a misconception regarding research. It is conventionally seen that research might be something difficult to study or to practice or do, but it is actually not so. We need to understand that what research is defined as, or what is the concept of research as such. We have to understand that research is a form of inquiry, and any inquiry can be a very generalized inquiry. But is research a generalized inquiry? The answer to this is no. Research is a systematic and structured form of inquiry. Systematic because it is mainly a very conceptual idea which is implemented step by step, and structured because there is a framework and there is a system through which we have to conduct the entire research process. So these are the two key words that we need to remember while we are understanding or conceptualizing research, that it is both systematic and it is structured. With this, we have to understand that within research, when we talk about the process component, there is a logical flow from one step to the other that has to be maintained in the entire research paradigm. You might ask, why do we conduct research? Or what is the purpose of doing research? We have to understand that research is aimed directly at understanding the concept of finding dependable, sustainable solutions to problems. In sociology, our problems are social problems, which are often very complex in nature and are multidimensional. So, research is basically targeted at solving or trying to find potential solutions to these complex problems. Next, that we need to understand that is research a core term, or is there a relationship between inquiry and research? We have to understand here that inquiry and research have a common relationship, that they are leading to each other. There is a forward linkage and a backward linkage. As you can see in the slide, the diagram which is provided, that if there is a lack of knowledge or limited knowledge about a certain concept or a certain idea or topic, then there arises the need of doing a research or a form of inquiry through which we can find information. So research results in findings and information. These findings and information provide the scope or pave the way for new research or further research or more information or more inquiry. On the other hand, this information moves towards new or modified findings that come from the research that has been done and tend to influence or tend to contribute to the lack of knowledge or the limited knowledge that we started off with. So this is basically a structural paradigm which is influencing both. Now, the objectives of the research needs to be understood clearly. The first objective of research is basically to add new knowledge, or to generate and add new knowledge into the existing body of knowledge. You might ask, what is the body of knowledge? So the body of knowledge is basically the information or the that exists about a certain topic or a certain concept, and knowledge can never be limited. There is always the scope to add multiple things onto what exists. So the primary objective, or the fundamental objective, if I may say so, is to add new knowledge or to generate new knowledge and enhance the existing knowledge. Additionally, we also need to understand that there are certain times when there is a certain existing knowledge, but there can always be the addition of supporting information or in-depth explanations and informations to that existing knowledge. and that addition of supporting information is done by research. Research aims to do a particular study on a particular topic and add more and more new information and support what is there. It is not saying that what is there is incorrect, but it is adding on to the information that is there, thus simplifying it, thus bringing in conceptual clarity and also enhancing our learning outcomes. Next, we have to understand that research tends to provide testing. They tend to test social phenomena, they tend to test facts, and they tend to test hypotheses, they tend to test the theories and provide evidence to form these theories and facts. If there are certain social problems, the aim or the objective of research is to find dependable, sustainable solutions to different social problems. There can be different functions of research. The functions of research can be various things like knowledge generation, it can be exploration, where one is trying to understand more or explore more about a topic which is very less studied. Furthermore, this can go on to the concepts of description, where the research is trying to describe in detail about a particular concept that has been done. Furthermore, we have to understand that research often tries to understand and to have a function of explanation, where it is trying to determine and explain the social phenomena that exists and tries to answer questions like what, why, how, when, and where. We have to understand the very basic concept of research methodology versus research methods. This is a very common terminological error that we make. There is a difference between research methodology and research methods. So as you can see in the slide, we have put two columns. In one, there is research methodology, the other is the research methods. The research methodology is basically a very broad banner term, or it is like an umbrella which consists of the philosophical traditions, the theoretical traditions, the methods of research, the research designs. It is a very broad umbrella term which consists of the entire conceptual framework. On the other hand, if we say research methods are basically specific approaches, tools that are used to collect data, to conduct the practical research and to analyze the data. On the other hand, methodology is basically the strategy or the plan. It is a broad plan of action or a strategy through which the fundamental component of practice of research will be determined, and in which the idea of what methods were chosen, why were those methods chosen, how was the sampling of the research conducted, all these things would be answered in a methodological plan. So that is research methodology. As you can see, I have put in a very simple equation form that philosophical tradition plus theoretical tradition plus the methods, which are the specific tools and techniques, all together combine research methodology. But on the other hand, research methods are basically very specific to what the approaches, the tools, the data collection process, analysis, those things. The approaches in research methods can vary. It can be narrative, it can be case studies, it can be surveys, and there are many others as well. The tools of data collection can range from interviews to observations to focus group discussions and many other tools that are there in research. In research, we have to understand the terminologies. It is a very systematic and scientific process, and that is why our terminologies are very important for research here. In research, the terminology is specific. Thus, it is also very important that we should not use them interchangeably, because every term has its own meaning. Concepts. So, what are concepts? Concepts are basically abstract ideas which are defined according to their particular characteristics. Concepts are drawn from observation of a number of specific cases. So if I say it is a concept, It means abstract. We are trying to understand the concept by trying to put a label or trying to put certain common characteristics that the concept has. And thus we know that this is a concept. Constructs. What are constructs? Constructs are also abstracts like concepts, but are not observable through variables. It is a formulation or a indication on the basis of multiple concepts. When we have multiple social concepts which are coming together to form a broad construct, that is basically a construct. Theoretical definition. So, theoretical definition is basically a conceptual framework or the meaning or the understanding that the label has been attached to broad topics or ideas. Ideas here are concepts. So, if I say that health is a concept, then the theoretical definition of health is definition which the World Health Organization might have provided for health. How do we know that health is a concept? Health is a broad concept because we know that there are multiple things that come within this concept. There are dimensions, there are characteristics which together create health. Or let's say if I take the example of poverty, we know that poverty is something that is very broad. So how do we define or how do we operationalize or functionalize poverty? That is where our concept of operational definition comes into existence. We have to understand that broad concepts like poverty or health cannot be brought into research as a whole. It needs to be brought down into small specific units on which the research would work, and that is why this comes as operational definition, where we are taking those operational specific units and we are working with them, we are bringing them into working bounds so that we can create our research or we can work on our research. Variables. What are variables? Variables are often called the building blocks of research or the functional units of research. Why? Because these variables are basically the specific units on which we are working to functionalize or practice our research. The key word here is practice. The practical component of research is extremely important. We have to understand that the units of measurement are, it can be measurement, it can be indication, but to these specific units which are called variables, there are certain specific assigned values or labels. Thus we can understand that this is different from the other and both variables are different from each other. So these values and labels are basically differentiating the variables and we are taking up these variables for our practical component of research. Now we have to look into what are the sources of data in research. As we have mentioned that research is primarily done on the basis of data. There has to be certain evidence or certain information through which we will be conducting our research. So research always has an underlying base in data. So we need to understand the sources of data. Initially, we have to understand the primary source of data, which consists of the data that we take from the field, directly from the field. The key word here that we have to understand is that the researcher might be present in the setting or might not be present in the setting, but the respondent of the research or the participant of the research who is providing us the data will always be a part of the study. The respondent will always be a part of the study. So we are gathering the data from the respondent or the participant of the research and we are taking it directly. We are using different methods, different tools, as we have already discussed, interviews, focus group discussion, questionnaires to gather the data from the respondent or the participant. This is called the primary sources of data. If this is primary sources of data, then the question will arise in your mind, then what is secondary sources of data? The secondary sources of data are the pre-existing research that has been done, the pre-existing information, research, books, journals, reports that are there in the literature. Also, insights from case studies, statistical information, statistical data, mathematical data can also be used as secondary sources of information. The difference that we need to understand here, that in primary data, we are going to the field and we are getting the data from the respondent, or we are administering our online questionnaires and surveys and getting the data from the respondent. So the respondent is always there, or the participant of the research is always there in the primary sources of data. But in secondary sources of data, we can take it from the internet, we can take it from the books, the journals, the case studies, reports, and many other sources. But it is not so that secondary sources of data is unstructured or haphazard. Secondary sources of data is also very systematic and structured, because we have to understand what are the sources that we can cite and what are the sources that we cannot cite. We have to check those sources, we have to read through those sources multiple times, and only then we can come up with the thematic information or the thematic concepts that we will use from the secondary sources of data into our research study. Now, we have to discuss the steps of implementation in the research process. As we have said, that research is a very systematic and process which basically goes step by step. So this is basically a flowchart which is set up from moving from top to bottom, that these are the steps that we will implement one after the other, and at the end of this process we will successfully complete our research. So the first step is the review of literature, the second being the statement of the problem, the third being the scope of the study. What is the scope of the study that we are going to do or we are proposing to do? Then the rationale or the rationale. Why are we doing this study? What is the rationale behind doing this particular research study? The objectives of the study, the research questions. The research questions are questions which, when answered, will fulfill the objective of the study. The research methodology, the site and the locale, sampling process, the data source and analysis framework, and the ethical consideration. Initially, we have to understand that before we get into the formal process of research, we do undertake a preliminary review of literature, but that is not technically counted within the research process, because the preliminary review of literature is very limited and it only gives us brief insights about the research topic that we want to work on. Initially, we have to understand our broad research area and we have to understand our specific research area. In the example that I have given in the slide, the broad research area might be health. As we know that health has many dimensions. So if we say that we want to research on health, we might not be able to do it because it is a very large scale thing, and there are many other things that are involved in health. So health is the broad research area, and if we say that we want to study maternal and child health, then that is the specific research area within the broad research area of health. After identifying the specific research area, we have to undertake a preliminary review of specific literature or limited literature, which will provide us the working understanding of our specific research area. The first step, review of literature. It is a systematic attempt to gain in-depth, extensive information and understanding to enhance the clarity about the research topic that we will work on. The review of literature is extremely vital because it provides the base and direction to the study. If we do not have a basic understanding of what we are going to work on, then it will become very difficult in the functional phase to work on it. The research is something that has to be conducted hands-on. And to perform hands-on, we have to understand or we have to read about our preconception. Now, we also need to understand that why the review of literature is very important at the very first stage. Because not only because it provides the base, it also helps to further discuss our findings when we complete our research. And together we can actually contribute from the research to the body of knowledge. Step 2, it is the statement of the problem. When we read or when we review our literature, we will find that there are certain gaps in the existing literature. There is no such topic which has been researched completely and there is nothing more left to research about. In every research topic, there is significant scope to research further. So we have to understand what are the gaps in the researches that have been done before us. Those gaps are very vital for us because that will help us to function or to create our scope of our own research that we will be carrying out or we will be conducting. Step 3, it is the scope of research. The scope of research is the imperative concept to identify and discuss those gaps and to find the existing scope or what can be done or what research can be done to fulfill those gaps that are there in the existing research. We have to also understand that the cause behind our research needs to be mentioned very clearly. There is always a reason behind conducting any research study or any study in general. So the rationale is the step 4, which is basically the concept that why are we doing the study that we are doing? What is the reason behind the study? The attempt here is made to answer the why question. Or what is the reason behind the study or why is the study being conducted? That is the rationale behind the study. Step 5, the objectives are a set of specific information that we complete at the end of the research, and fulfilling of these objectives will finish the research. The research questions that are formed based on and in consultation with research objectives have to be understood. The basic idea is that these are questions. When these questions will be answered, the answer to these questions will directly fulfill and achieve the research objectives. Step 7 is the research methodology. The technical component or the practical component of the research comes into functioning here. The identification of whether the research will be qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods research needs to be conducted. Not only does it need to be conducted, it also has to be justified. Identified and justified, that why is the particular methodology being chosen and what is the reason behind choosing the methodology, how will it help the study, what will the outcome be like. So these have to be justified. So again, with research, we also have to understand what are the study designs, is it very specific or not, what is the approach that the research will be using, right? The tools of data collection that the research will be using. So the entire functional component or the practical implementation of the research is done in the research methodology component. Step 8 is the site and the locale. We have to understand where are we going to collect the data from, or where are we going to conduct the study or function the study or run the studies. That is our site. The site and the locale, we'll have to understand that whether the research will be conducted in a city or it will be conducted in a village. If it will be conducted in a rural setting in a village, then which villages will be taken? If it is in a city, then what part of the city will it be taken? Will it take data from all parts of the city? Will it justify the complete city or will it not justify the complete city? So the locale and the site of the research, where the work will be conducted, where the research will be implemented, is extremely important. Step 9, it is the sampling process. This is basically where we tend to understand and identify the population, the sampling frame, the type of sampling, and the sampling strategy. The sample size needs to be understood at how many people will participate in our research. If it is qualitative research, the sample size might be relatively low, but if it is quantitative research, then it has to be a relatively bigger N. Furthermore, now we have to understand the concept of the data source and the analysis framework. We have taken primary data, we have taken secondary data, but we need to understand and we need to actually explain that which data is what and from where we have taken. Analysis framework is basically to provide an understanding about what kind of data have we taken and what is the analysis that we are drawing. In terms of quantitative data, there are multiple softwares like SPSS, there is Excel. On the qualitative side of it, there are softwares like there is QDMiner, there is Atlas TI. So these softwares we have to take into consideration and say that these are the softwares that we have used. These are the places where we are analyzing the data through these softwares. Next, we have to understand the ethical consideration. This is a very vital and very important component of the research. The ethical consideration is basically the guiding framework of certain principles that the study is based upon. Ethics is something that is very important not only in research but also in life in general. In research, ethics is specifically important because it deals with the concepts of informed consent of whom? Informed consent of the respondents or the participants. We cannot force any respondent or participant to participate in the study forcefully. We cannot force. So we have to get their consent, to show them mutual respect, and voluntarily they would have to participate in the study. If the respondents are from vulnerable populations and they do not want to be identified, then we have to put our anonymity into place, that we do not mention their identity or their names anywhere in our research. We also have to understand the concepts of confidentiality, where we have to get the data from them and that data will be ethically used and will not be put in the public domain or shared, and it will only be used for the cause that has been told to the respondent. To summarize, we have to understand that the research has to be conducted through implementation of the steps in a very systematic manner, and which will result in the successful completion of the study. Thank you.